He messed with my 401k. He instantly regretted it. It started subtly. A misplaced decimal point here, a misallocated transaction there. Nothing that would raise immediate alarm, but enough to prick my finely tuned financial analyst senses. I'm Mark Olson, and for the last 8 years, Sterling Investments had been my life. I wasn't flashy, wasn't the guy who closed the billion-dollar deals, but I was the guy who made sure the numbers added up, the foundation upon which those deals were built. David Harding, my supervisor, was the opposite of me. Charismatic, always impeccably dressed, he was the golden boy of Sterling. He'd taken me under his wing when I first joined, mentoring me, pushing me to excel. I genuinely admired him. That's why, when I first noticed the anomalies in the 401k reports, I dismissed them. Probably just a clerical error, I told myself. But the errors kept recurring, and they all seemed to funnel into the same few obscure investment vehicles. I started digging, spending late nights after Brenda, my wife, was asleep, poring over spreadsheets, tracing the money. It was like following a breadcrumb trail, each crumb leading to another, until I realized the trail wasn't leading anywhere good. It was leading to offshore accounts, shell corporations, and ultimately to a web of transactions that pointed directly back to David Harding. The sinking feeling in my stomach was like nothing I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just the money, though the amounts were significant, hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned from the retirement accounts of Sterling's employees. It was the betrayal. The man I admired, the man I trusted, was a thief. I confided in Sarah Chen, a resident cybersecurity whiz and one of the few people at Sterling I considered a true friend. She was skeptical at first, but after I showed her the data, her eyes widened. This is bad, Mark. Really bad. Sarah helped me track the digital fingerprints, the IP addresses, the timestamps. She confirmed my suspicions Harding was using his privileged access to manipulate the system, diverting funds with near-perfect impunity. I knew I had to confront him. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. I requested a meeting with Harding. He greeted me with his usual affable smile, but I could sense a flicker of unease in his eyes. David, I need to talk to you about the 401k reports, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. His smile faltered. What about them, Mark? Anything I can help you with? I laid out my findings, the discrepancies, the offshore accounts, the digital trail leading back to him. I watched as his face went from affable to dismissive to outright hostile. This is absurd, Mark, he said, his voice hardening. These are just coincidences. You're jumping to conclusions. I have proof, David, solid proof. He stood up, towering over me. You don't know what you're doing, Mark. You're playing with fire. You should drop this for your own good. I can't, David. People are being robbed. I can't just stand by and let that happen. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a chilling calculation. You've made a mistake, Mark, he said finally, his voice low and menacing. A big mistake. That was the turning point. The moment I went from being a valued employee to a target. The retaliation was swift and brutal. My performance reviews, which had always been stellar, suddenly plummeted. I was assigned impossible deadlines, blamed for errors I didn't make, and publicly humiliated in meetings. Harding used his influence to isolate me, turning my colleagues against me. Brenda noticed the change immediately. What's going on, Mark? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. You're stressed all the time. You're not sleeping. Is it the job? I tried to downplay it, not wanting to worry her, but she saw through my facade. I eventually told her the truth, leaving out the details about the SEC investigation I was now seriously considering. The financial pressure mounted. My bonus was cut, then eliminated altogether. We started dipping into our savings, and the fear of losing everything, our house, our security, became a constant weight on my chest. Then came the whispers. Rumors about my competence, my integrity, my mental stability. Harding was systematically destroying my reputation, turning me into a pariah within the company. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of lies and deceit. I confided in Kevin, my best friend since college, who was now a lawyer specializing in corporate law. He listened patiently as I recounted my ordeal. Document everything, Mark, he advised. Every meeting, every email, every conversation. You're going to need it. And seriously consider going to the SEC. This sounds like a clear-cut case of fraud. He was right, of course. I knew I had to take action, but I was terrified. I had a wife, a mortgage, responsibilities. Going up against Harding, against Sterling Investments, felt like suicide. But I couldn't back down. I had to do what was right, no matter the cost. I spent weeks gathering evidence, meticulously documenting Harding's actions, building a case that was as airtight as possible. Then, using a burner email account and a VPN, I anonymously tipped off the SEC. Days turned into weeks and I heard nothing. I started to lose hope, wondering if I'd made the right decision. Then, one morning, Alina Vance walked into Sterling Investments. Alina Vance was a seasoned SEC investigator, a woman with a reputation for being tough, fair, and relentless. She arrived with a team of investigators and immediately launched a full-scale investigation into the company's 401k program. Harding, of course, played the innocent, feigning surprise and cooperation. But I could see the panic in his eyes. He knew the walls were closing in. The investigation was like a hurricane, tearing through the company, exposing every lie, every hidden transaction, every act of corruption. Employees were interviewed, documents were subpoenaed, and Harding's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. I was interviewed by Alina Vance herself. She was sharp, incisive, and she didn't miss a thing. I laid out my case, presented my evidence, and watched as her expression hardened. "Thank you, Mr. Olson," she said, her voice firm. "Your information has been invaluable." Harding, meanwhile, was scrambling to cover his tracks. He destroyed documents, intimidated witnesses, and tried to pin the blame on others. But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming, and the SEC was closing in. Sarah played a crucial role, using her cybersecurity skills to recover deleted files and expose Harding's attempts to tamper with the company's computer systems. She was risking her career, but she was determined to see justice done. The climax came during a company-wide meeting called by Alina Vance. She stood before the assembled employees, her gaze sweeping across the room. "We have uncovered evidence of widespread fraud and embezzlement within Sterling Investments' 401k program," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "And we have identified the individual responsible." All eyes turned to David Harding, who was sitting in the front row, his face pale and drawn. Alina Vance paused for dramatic effect. "David Harding," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, "you are under arrest." The room erupted in gasps of shock and disbelief. Harding tried to protest, but he was quickly surrounded by federal agents and led away in handcuffs. The aftermath was chaotic. Sterling Investments went into damage control mode, issuing apologies and promising to cooperate fully with the investigation. The company's CEO, Mr. Thompson, looked utterly bewildered, clearly unaware of the extent of Harding's corruption. I was vindicated, of course. My name was cleared, my reputation restored. But the experience had left its mark. I was no longer the naive, trusting employee I once was. I had seen the dark side of corporate greed, and it had changed me. The SEC worked tirelessly to recover the stolen funds, and eventually, every affected employee received their lost money back. It was a long and arduous process, but justice was finally served. Harding was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to a significant prison term and ordered to pay millions of dollars in restitution. I received a personal apology from Mr. Thompson, who admitted that he had been too trusting and too focused on the bottom line. He offered me a promotion, a chance to rebuild my career at Sterling Investments, but I declined. I had lost my faith in the company, in the system. I knew I couldn't go back to being just another cog in the machine. Instead, I decided to start my own financial consulting firm, focusing on ethics, transparency, and accountability. I wanted to help other companies avoid the mistakes that Sterling Investments had made, to protect employees from being victimized by greed and corruption. It was a risky move, leaving the security of a stable job to start my own business. But I knew it was the right thing to do. I had learned a valuable lesson that integrity is more important than money, and that doing what's right is always worth the risk. Brenda was incredibly supportive. She believed in me, in my vision, and she knew that I needed to do something meaningful with my life. Starting the firm was tough, a real uphill battle. I used what savings we had to get it going, and Kevin helped with all the legal documents. Slowly, painstakingly, I built my client base, focusing on companies that shared my values. I used my experience, my knowledge, and my unwavering commitment to integrity to earn their trust. Years later, Olson Financial Consulting is thriving, and I'm getting great results. I get to help companies establish ethical and transparent 401k management. I can finally say it was all worth it. I think back to those late nights at my old firm, poring over numbers that shouldn't add up, and I'm glad I did the right thing. David Harding messed with the wrong 401k, he messed with my integrity, and he messed with my livelihood. and now he is where he belongs.